What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review. This time we're going to cover a film I watched the other night from 1987. That is Clive Barker's masterpiece, Hellraiser. Yes, this is a film that I think is probably a top 20 horror film for me. Fuck the franchise. I'm fine with number one. I like number two. I love number four, which is sort of like blasphemy. I don't think number three is that fantastic, but Hellraiser is definitely a film that it's kind of like the Godzilla films where the Cenobites, like Pinhead and his buddies, they're on screen for like maybe 10 minutes of the film, and I think it's cool that it's such an iconic, part of the Hellraiser film, because the majority of the Hellraiser film is about this man and wife. The wife is totally unfaithful. She was unfaithful with the brother of her husband, and she's basically helping him return from hell. Okay, so basically the movie starts off with, it kind of reminds me of god damn it, like Gremlins kind of thing, or almost like the Poltergeist. It's in like a foreign land, and there's a person buying something, and there's Uncle Frank, who's this dude that's like a total sadist. He's always looking for the latest pleasure, and the weirdest pleasure he can find, basically. So he ends up buying this little box, which you see here on the cover, which is explained more in depth in part 4, I believe, Bloodlines. And he goes into this attic of his family's house. He opens up the box and basically disappears into hell, and he's tortured and tormented and stuff. Flash forward, his brother and his wife move into this house. The wife discovers Frank's little makeshift area where he was living in the house. There's like maggots, and it's totally just shitty. Like, he hasn't been there for a while, and she discovers these photos in this little box and keeps one of the photos. She goes upstairs and her husband, who's moving a piece of furniture upstairs, cuts his hand all to shit, and his blood hits the floor, and it sort of reincarnates the body of Uncle Frank. And now he's coming back slowly. He just starts off as like this pile of bones with a little bit of like tendons and veins, and the more blood he consumes through his brother's wife bringing him victims. So like, she'd go to the bar, act slutty, and bring home a guy, and then would hit the guy with a hammer over the head, and then Frank would use the blood or whatever for sustenance. It's kind of like The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, like how he keeps coming back every time he kills a person. He comes back a little bit more, and then right by the end he ends up embodying his brother, and the daughter of Uncle Frank's brother, I forget what the dad's name is, but his daughter is a big part of the film as well. She's sort of, like this student type person that comes to live near where the father is, gets a job, all that kind of stuff. She doesn't really want to have much to do with her father, not so much the father, but the stepmom. And, she befriends this guy who's like a son of the father's friend, and she ends up working at this pet shop. There's a very bizarre scene where like this hobo is in the pet shop, and like he's eating handfuls of crickets and stuff, and he comes back later on in the film, and that always freaked me the fuck out. But we learn that Frank has made a deal with these Cenobites, and he keeps saying we got to get out of here before they show up, and this and that. And we finally find out later on that what he's running from is Pinhead and the Cenobites. So there's a few. I think some of the names, there was like Butterball, there was the Chatterer guy, and there was the Lady Cenobite, which me and Kayla always laugh about that, because it's like they're that cheap they couldn't give her like a fun name. They just call her Lady Cenobite. And then I think Pinhead's name is like Lead Cenobite, but he's just such an iconic presence, a powerful presence on screen. I especially love whenever the Cenobites are going to show up. If there's any cracks in the wall or cracks in the floors, like it starts glowing blue, and like there's like smoke and fog coming, and there's this weird sort of bell noise I think everybody associates Hellraiser with. And they show up out of the shadows, basically. And Pinhead has one of the most iconic phrases in any film. I think I've seen versions that have it on the cover. This is the Anchor Bay release, but he says, "We're explorers into the further realms of experience, angels to some, demons to others. Like, I think that's so badass, and he's so just like demonic and crazy, and like, you know, it's when he says like, we have such sights to show you to the daughter. He's so like, it's almost like he's coming when he says it, man. It's so crazy. I love this film. I love you know, the scene where she's in the hospital, the daughter's in the hospital, and she's attacked by that thing that's clearly being pushed by a couple of guys on a cart, but it's besides the fact. Like, it looks great. You know, I think the steal of the show, other than Pinhead, is Uncle Frank. I think Uncle Frank is a very cool character, a very, you know, memorable guy, and I love how this film sort of ends, you know, in the same way that it begins, where there's this old Asian guy selling another version of the box. I think that's really cool. And you know what? As good as part 2 is, as good as part 3 is even, and 4, I love 4. If this was a standalone horror film, I think it would be fine. You know what I mean? Like, it would be, like, that's the thing I don't really get. Like, everything, especially from this era, demanded a franchise. And I feel like a lot of franchises, or a lot of films, hurt because of that. Like, think of, like, Chucky. As good as I like part 2 and 3, part 1 is amazing. If there was just part 1 and it was just this voodoo doll movie, I think it would be so much better than, you know, like those later sequels that just are totally ass. Same goes with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, not a fan of part 2, not a fan of part 3, part 4, 3D, or the fucking new one, or Leatherface, but I do like the 03 remake and the beginning. I think those are fantastic. Really good. I've recently watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 03, and it holds up totally. Like, I love the film. I think that Leatherface looks like his most crazy, his most evil in that film. His chainsaw is just like reeking the smoke out of it. Great stuff. But Hellraiser is definitely a franchise that I have not seen all of them. I know my friend Danny B, shout out to Danny B, I think he's been watching them recently. But I think part 1 is the one to watch. And part 2 is still really good, don't get me wrong. There's actually, I haven't had Shudder in a long time, but when I had Shudder, there was a really good documentary about Hellraiser part 2. So I would highly recommend checking that out, however you got to check it out. I'm actually looking probably to get Shudder again, because I feel like there's some good exclusive stuff always popping in and out of my consciousness on the internet, Instagram, all that stuff. So if you have not watched Hellraiser, I highly recommend checking it out. Doug Bradley is amazing as Pinhead. Uncle Frank, I love him. Uncle Frank, the actor, was actually in a film I watched recently called Made in Britain. He has a small role, but I remember thinking, like, fuck, is that Uncle Frank? Like, kiss me, kiss daddy. It's so fucked. Love the flick, man. So thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. And with that being said, adios.